You ever have a moment so surreal, so brutally unfair, that your brain just stops? That was me, 38,000 feet in the air, somewhere between Europe and the East Coast, staring at a glowing screen that had just upended my entire life in 7 words. Termination of employment, effective immediately. No warning, no phone call, not even a lame excuse, just an email, sent while I was still on a plane in business class, returning from closing the biggest deal my company had ever seen. My name is Evelyn Sloan. I am 38 years old, a global strategy consultant from Chicago, Illinois. Or at least I was, until StratagemCore decided to erase me like a typo in a report. For context, I was not just an employee. I was the woman behind their most ambitious global expansion. The 10-month campaign I just wrapped up connected 3 continents, 5 regulatory bodies, and nearly $2 billion in revenue. I had not slept a full night in months. I had eaten my weight in terrible airplane food, missed my sister's wedding, and walked into dozens of boardrooms where I was the only woman, and the only person who actually knew what was going on. I gave them everything, and their thank you gift was a digital pink slip while I was still wearing the same navy blazer I pitched the deal in. I remember looking out the plane window, somewhere over the Atlantic, watching the clouds roll by like none of this was real. My seatmate asked if I was all right. I smiled and said, "Just turbulence." I did not cry. Not yet. Instead, I ordered another coffee, cold, bitter, and way too expensive, and let the anger rise slowly in my chest. The kind of quiet, focused rage you only get when the betrayal cuts deep. The kind of rage that does not explode but simmers. The kind that plans. Let me be clear. I was not some bitter middle manager they forgot to lay off years ago. I was vice president of global strategy. I had an office overlooking the river, a corner desk, and a list of contacts that people would pay good money to get access to. And yet, somehow, none of that protected me from the politics, the nepotism, or the quiet misogyny that had always lurked beneath StratagemCore's polished glass exterior. I should have seen it coming, but I was too loyal, too focused, too trusting. It was not like I had made enemies. In fact, I had made the company millions. I had secured clients they never thought they could land. When our biggest European partner threatened to walk 2 years ago, it was me who flew to Frankfurt on 2 hours' notice and saved the deal with a handwritten napkin pitch. I stayed late, I showed up early, and I never asked for applause. I thought that would be enough. But when the CEO's daughter, a 20-something with no international experience and a degree she barely earned, started showing up in my meetings just to observe, I should have known. As I sat there on that flight, trying to process what had just happened, something inside me shifted. Not broken, just realigned, like a compass turning toward a different kind of north. Because if they thought that firing me midair, like I was disposable, was the end of my story, they were about to learn who I really was. I did not just walk away with a bruised ego. I walked away with knowledge, leverage, and a network that trusted me. Not them. They thought they had silenced me. What they really did was set me free, set me. So yes, I was fired in the sky. But I did not fall. I landed. Hard. And when I hit the ground, I already knew what my next move was going to be. They took everything from me in a single email, and in return, I would take back what I built, piece by piece. Only this time, under my own name. And trust me, I would not be sending any warning emails when I did it. They forgot who I was. 11 years. That is how long I worked at StratagemCore. I was not some new hire they could let go without consequence. I was not an interchangeable piece in their corporate machine. I was the one who built their international expansion program from the ground up. There was no playbook when I started, just a chaotic mix of regions, languages, tax codes, and vague promises. I turned all of that into a real department, with real systems and real global contracts. Every global deal they have closed in the last decade began with a strategy I wrote, a client I nurtured, or a contact I pulled from years of experience. But when it came time to give credit, my name was always missing. They loved to smile for the cameras when things went well. Julian Cormack, the CEO, had this signature move. He would pose with both hands folded, soft smile, shoulders square to the lens. That smile ended up in every quarterly report, every press release, every investor pitch. You would think he was the one flying across time zones and sitting in boardrooms till midnight. But it was not him. It was me. The closest I ever got to a headline was a footnote at the bottom of a presentation deck. And then there was his daughter, Tessa, 27, loud on social media, and quick to post selfies at events I planned, with captions like, "Proud to represent StratagemCore's global vision." Global vision? She had never even led a call with an international client without me in the room. 3 years ago, we were on the verge of losing one of our biggest European contracts. A merger on their side had created complications, and we were weeks away from being replaced. I spent 18 straight days fixing it. I flew to Brussels twice in 1 week. I rewrote our proposal from scratch. I talked to lawyers, regulators, and even managed to get a competitor's rep to delay his bid. And we won. We kept the contract. That deal alone saved the company over $200 million in long-term revenue. But when the press release went out, guess who it quoted? Julian. "A great win for our leadership team," he said. Not one mention of my name. I stayed silent. I told myself it was part of the job. I believed that my work spoke for itself, that the people who mattered knew the truth. I was wrong. What I learned, slowly and painfully, is that if you let people overlook you long enough, they will eventually convince themselves you were never that important to begin with. And then one day, when you are no longer useful to them, they will toss you aside like you never mattered. That was the moment I realized they had forgotten who I really was. But let me be clear. I was not angry because I needed applause. I did not need awards or headlines or likes. I needed respect. I needed acknowledgement, and they gave neither. Every time I succeeded, they found a way to water it down. Every time I spoke up in a leadership meeting, I was told to be more collaborative, which, in their language, meant less assertive. They used my skills, my time, my loyalty, and then pretended I was just part of the background. The truth is, I was never part of their inner circle. I was a builder, and builders are only valuable when something needs fixing. After that, they become invisible. But what they forgot, what they all forgot, is that I was the one who made it all work. I was the one who brought in the money, kept the deals alive, and held the strategy together when no one else knew what to do. I had the relationships. I had the knowledge. And, as they were about to find out, I also had a very good memory. They forgot me. But I remembered everything. Every slight, every dismissal, every time my voice was ignored while someone else took the credit. That kind of forgetting has a cost, and they were going to pay it in full. Because while they were busy playing politics, I was paying attention. And now, I was free. No titles, no filters. Just me, my experience, and a very clear understanding of what they never saw coming. Last quarter, I was promised the role of Executive Director of Global Operations. It was not just something I wanted, I earned it. I had spent over a decade building the company's international strategy from the ground up. I had closed more deals than anyone else on the leadership team, trained entire departments, and expanded our footprint into regions no one at StratagemCore had even considered. I had the experience, the numbers, the trust of our clients, and the respect of our global partners. The promotion was supposed to be a formality. Everyone in the office knew I was next in line, until I was not. When the announcement came, we were all gathered in the executive conference room. Julian Cormack stood at the head of the table like he always did, calm, confident, rehearsed. He smiled that same empty smile and said he had made a bold decision for the company's future. That was the first red flag. I watched as he turned toward his daughter and announced her as the new Executive Director of Global Operations. Tessa Cormack, 27 years old, no real leadership experience, no global strategy background, just a familiar last name and a LinkedIn profile full of filtered photos and secondhand success. Everyone clapped. I stayed silent. Tessa had led exactly 0 deals. She had never even been the primary point of contact on a regional partnership. During one client dinner, she asked if Luxembourg was somewhere near Russia. I remember the silence at that table so clearly, the way the client from Brussels looked at me like he was waiting for me to say something that would make it better. But I could not. I smiled politely, changed the subject, and fixed it later, like I always did. And now, that was the person they handed my promotion to. It was not just insulting, it was humiliating. Later that day, I went to Julian's office. I wanted an explanation. I wanted to understand how, after everything I had done, I was passed over for someone who still needed help setting up a conference call. He did not even look surprised when I asked. He just leaned back in his chair and said, "Evelyn, you are too commanding in meetings. You tend to overshadow others." I stared at him, not sure whether to laugh or scream. Too commanding? I had led billion-dollar negotiations. I had calmed foreign ministers and closed contracts in 3 languages. And now I was being told that my competence was the problem? What he really meant was simple. Tessa was fragile, and I made her look like what she truly was, unprepared. Every time she stumbled in a meeting, I picked up the slack. Every time she missed a deadline, I covered for her. And every time she took credit for something I had done, I stayed quiet to protect the image of the company. But Julian was not protecting the company. He was protecting his legacy. He was trying to build a future where his daughter would be seen as the visionary, and I was simply the support staff, the helper, the woman who handled the details. That was the moment it all shifted. I had always known the company played politics. I had seen it happen to other people, but I believed, deep down, that my results would speak louder than their games. I thought I could outrun the bias with performance. I thought I could outwork the favoritism. But I could not. They did not want a leader who knew how to win. They wanted a name they could shape, control, and hide behind when things got messy. Tessa was the perfect choice. She would never challenge them. She would never make them feel small. I did. The final betrayal was not just the title, it was the message behind it. No matter how good I was, I would never be good enough for them. Not because I lacked the skill, but because I had too much of it. I made them uncomfortable. I reminded them that power should be earned, not inherited. That success should be built, not gifted. They could not control me. So instead, they sidelined me. And when that did not work, they fired me. But what they never realized is that I was never theirs to keep. I built my own future once. I could do it again. And this time, no one would stand in my way. 6 months before I was fired, Tessa made a mistake, a serious one. She had been given responsibility for overseeing a government compliance filing tied to a renewal contract in Germany, our second largest European partner at the time. It was a high-stakes account, one we could not afford to lose. But she submitted the wrong documentation, failed to flag a regulatory update, and missed a critical deadline that could have disqualified us from bidding entirely. I found out about it by accident. One of our legal analysts emailed me in a panic, saying the German regulators were asking why a required attachment was missing. I checked the system, and sure enough, it was gone, never submitted. Tessa had marked it as completed, but she had skipped the final step. By the time I pieced everything together, we had less than 48 hours to fix it. I stayed up all night cross-referencing documents, rewriting sections, and reaching out to our contacts in Berlin. I called in every favor I had. I even booked a red-eye flight I never took, just in case I needed to be there in person. We managed to resubmit under an emergency clause with a revised timestamp. I wrote a personal note to the German team, apologizing for the confusion and reinforcing our commitment to compliance. The contract was saved, but barely. It was a close call that could have cost the company millions. But instead of confronting the issue publicly, Julian called me into his office the next morning. He thanked me for handling it. Then, in the same breath, he asked me to keep it off the record. No formal report, no disciplinary note, no internal audit, just silence. He said it would damage Tessa's reputation and hurt confidence in the new leadership. I wanted to say no. I wanted to speak up. But after years of being the one who held things together, I did what I always did. I fixed it and stayed quiet. I told myself I was protecting the company. I told myself that being a team player mattered more than proving a point. I told myself it was just one mistake. But I was wrong. That silence is what buried me. Tessa never admitted to the error. She never took responsibility. And she certainly never thanked me. Instead, 2 weeks later, she posted a long message on LinkedIn celebrating a successful compliance cycle and a seamless renewal with our German partners. She called it a team effort led by forward-thinking leadership. My name was nowhere in it. She stood on the foundation I had rebuilt for her and acted like she had laid every brick. And once again, Julian clapped from the sidelines, proud of his daughter for a job she never actually did. Looking back, I regret that cover-up more than anything else. Not because it hurt my ego, but because it showed them they could rely on me to clean up their messes and never ask for credit. It showed them that I would protect their image, even at the expense of my own future. I gave them permission to ignore me. And when the time came to decide who stayed and who went, I had already made myself invisible. I had already trained them to overlook me. And they did. There was no thank you, no formal recognition, no closed-door conversation to acknowledge what I had saved. Just silence. And then, months later, a pink slip at 39,000 feet. I was not just terminated. I was erased. And the very moment I had chosen to protect them became the reason they believed I was no longer needed. They thought I would just move on quietly, like I always had. But something changed in me that day, because covering for them might have saved the contract, but it cost me everything else. That was the last time I ever put their reputation ahead of mine. From that moment forward, I promised myself one thing. I would never again let someone else's mistake define my worth. They thought they were safe behind the silence. But what they did not know is that I remember every detail, every cover-up, every lie, and every name. And while I may have stayed quiet once, I was no longer in the business of keeping other people's secrets. Not anymore. What StratagemCore never knew, I tell you, was this. I had been building my exit for months, long before they fired me, long before Tessa took credit for my work, and long before Julian decided my leadership was too loud for his legacy. While they were busy polishing their egos and managing appearances, I was laying the groundwork for something real, something that could not be taken from me in an email. Every late night they thought I was finishing their reports. I was working on mine. Every weekend they assumed I was resting, I was planning. Not my downfall, my return. It all started in a small co-working space on the west side of Chicago. Nothing fancy. Just chipped paint, a coffee pot that barely worked, and a corner desk that became my sanctuary. That space saw more of my real work than my corporate office ever did. I brought my own lamp, my own chair, and one simple goal: build the kind of firm I always wanted to work for. I called it Solvanta Group. The name came to me one night around 2 a.m. It meant solutions, strength, forward momentum, everything StratagemCore had forgotten how to be. Solvanta would not be built on hierarchy and empty promises. We would be lean, fast, and honest. No political games, no empty titles, just results and relationships. We would listen first and act fast. We would be the kind of consulting firm that actually understood the clients instead of talking down to them. And more than anything, we would never treat people like they were disposable. I wrote the values down on a whiteboard with a blue marker, circled each one, and stared at them like a vow. I brought on 3 people to help quietly: an attorney I trusted, a financial analyst I had worked with years ago, and a global strategist who had left StratagemCore after the same kind of mistreatment I had just endured. None of them wanted their names public yet, but they believed in the mission. We met under the radar, usually late at night. Our meetings were quiet, focused, and filled with energy I had not felt in years. These were not corporate drones. These were builders, doers, people who wanted to change the way the industry worked. By the time StratagemCore fired me, everything was already in place. The LLC papers were signed. The branding was done. The website was under construction. Our advisory board was ready to move. I had even secured the first draft of an operating agreement and run financial models for 3 different client tiers. We were small, but we were solid. And more importantly, we were real. I was not just fired. I was freed. All the fear they thought I would feel, disappointment, panic, self-doubt, it never came. Instead, I felt ready. The truth is, I had stayed too long in a place that no longer fit me. They thought they were ending my career, but what they actually did was give me a clean break, a reason to go all in. Without the burden of carrying their broken systems, I could finally build something better. I could finally take the lead without having to apologize for it. Solvanta was not about revenge. It was about rebirth. And this time, no one would be able to take it from me. I kept everything quiet for a reason. I needed space to think clearly, to plan without pressure. But deep down, I also knew that the moment I shared it, everything would change. Clients would notice, the industry would talk, and StratagemCore would finally understand what they had lost. Not because I told them, but because they would see what happened when someone like me stopped building for them and started building for herself. They tried to erase me, but I had already written the next chapter. They thought they owned my future, but I had already claimed it. I was not angry anymore. I was focused. I was ready. And the next time they heard my name, it would not be in a meeting or an email thread. It would be in headlines, right next to Solvanta, a name they would never forget. That final business trip before they cut me off, it was supposed to be a victory lap. The end of a long, demanding stretch of negotiations that had pushed me to the edge. But looking back, it turned out to be the perfect opportunity. I just did not realize it at the time. I had flown over 20,000 miles in 2 weeks, meeting with our most critical global partners. At every stop, I handled the face-to-face conversations, finalized the paperwork, smoothed out last-minute concerns, and secured their commitment. But what I also did, quietly and carefully, was listen. And what I heard told me everything I needed to know. In Hong Kong, I had lunch with Noah Lin, a telecom executive I had worked with for almost 5 years. He was smart, blunt, and never one for small talk. We were seated at a quiet rooftop restaurant overlooking the harbor, catching up after a long morning of meetings. Halfway through the meal, he looked up from his plate and asked me without hesitation, "Why are you still at that dinosaur of a company?" I laughed at first, thinking he was joking, but he was not. He meant it. He had watched me build solutions while others stalled, solve problems others created, and deliver results that made his team look like heroes. He was not trying to flatter me. He was giving me a signal. In Madrid, I met with Lucia Morales, a strategy lead at one of the fastest-growing tech firms in Europe. We had built a strong working relationship over the years. She had always been direct with me, and this time was no different. After we wrapped up the contract renewal discussion, she leaned in and said, "Evelyn, wherever you go next, I am in. I would follow you anywhere." It stopped me for a moment. I smiled politely, but inside I felt a shift. Lucia was not just talking about business. She was expressing loyalty, trust. She had no idea what I was building yet, but something in her tone told me she would not need much convincing when I was ready. In São Paulo, I sat down with Daniel Kawahara, a longtime operations partner in Latin America. He had always been hard to impress and even harder to win over. But over the years, I had earned his respect. We had gone through 2 mergers, 3 major pivots, and countless late-night phone calls trying to fix things that were not even our fault. This meeting was meant to be routine, just sign the final documents, shake hands, and move on. But as we wrapped up, Daniel paused, shook my hand firmly, and said, "When you move, call me first." I nodded and said nothing, but my mind was already racing. I had not even made my pitch, yet they were already in. What StratagemCore never understood was that loyalty does not come from power or position. It comes from trust, and over the years, I had built trust. Not with flashy titles or empty promises, but by showing up, by being honest, by doing the work. These 3 people, Noah, Lucia, and Daniel, had no idea they were part of my future plan. But in that moment, I knew they would be. The seed had already been planted. All I had to do was water it. I kept things vague. I did not reveal anything yet. I asked questions instead. I listened to their frustrations with StratagemCore, their concerns about slow response times, poor communication, rigid contracts, and a lack of agility. Everything they hated about the company were the very things I was solving for at Solvanta. Every complaint matched a solution we had already drafted. I left each meeting with more than a signature. I left with momentum. As I boarded the final flight home, I felt something I had not felt in a long time: clarity. This trip, which StratagemCore had sent me on thinking I was just closing a deal for them, had become the soft launch of something much bigger. The last flight I took as their employee became the first step toward everything I would build next. They thought I was securing their future, but in truth, I was preparing my own. And the best part? I had not even said a word about Solvanta yet. I did not need to. The right people were already waiting. 3 days after I was fired, I sat in my apartment in Chicago, still jet-lagged and angry, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop. Outside, snow flurries drifted past the windows. Inside, my living room was littered with folders, notebooks, and a whiteboard crammed with scribbles from months of late-night planning. I had not slept much since the flight. The rush of being free was still tangled with the sting of betrayal. But the time for shock had passed. I took a deep breath, clicked compose, and wrote one email. Just one. No pitch deck, no backstory, no revenge speech. Just 4 words. Let's build from here. I sent it to 3 people: Noah Lynn, Lucia Morales, Daniel Kawahara. Each one had already shown me where they stood. I was not asking them for anything. I was inviting them into something. Those 4 words were not flashy, but they said everything that needed to be said. This was not a rescue mission. It was a starting line, a new game, and they knew it. I sat back, staring at the screen, waiting. I thought it might take a few days. Maybe they would need time to think. I was wrong. Noah responded in 10 minutes. 10. Just a single sentence. Tell me what you need. That was it. No questions, no hesitation. He had already made up his mind. Lucia replied an hour later. You already know I am in, she wrote, followed by a wink emoji and a link to her calendar. She had cleared the rest of her week. Daniel called that same evening. Not a message, not a reply, a direct call. I had not heard his voice in São Paulo. His first words were, "You better not be joking." I laughed, said I was not. And just like that, he said, "I'm in." They did not need long presentations or spreadsheets. They did not care about titles or office space or funding rounds. What they cared about was trust, and they trusted me. We jumped on a video call the next morning. Just the 4 of us. No assistants, no filters. I laid out what I had been building. Solvanta Group. The vision, the strategy, the clients we could target, the technology we would use to move faster, leaner, better. They asked smart questions, poked holes, pointed out risks. But by the end of that call, we had a decision. We were doing this. By the end of that week, Lucia had introduced me to 2 of her former colleagues from Amsterdam who had just left a major firm and were looking for their next big move. Noah looped in his internal data systems guy, a quiet genius named Elias, who had built an operations dashboard that put StratagemCores to shame. Daniel pulled in a logistics specialist in Santiago who had been sitting on a supply chain solution no one at StratagemCore had ever bothered to test. The pieces were falling into place faster than I had expected, faster than I had even hoped. I kept it small at first. No announcements, no social media, just quiet conversations one by one. The whisper of something new, something better, started to move through the industry. And the best part? I knew StratagemCore would not even see it coming. They had been too focused on silencing me, on making space for their golden girl, on burying my name behind press releases and office politics. What they forgot was that power does not sit in titles. It sits in trust, in track records, in the people who show up when it matters. And those people had just shown up for me. I printed the phrase "let's build from here" on a sticky note and stuck it to my laptop. It was not flashy, but it was real. It was the bridge between what they thought they ended and what I was about to begin. 4 words. That was all it took. Not because I was lucky, not because I was special, but because when you spend years doing the work, showing up, telling the truth, and treating people right. Those 4 words become more powerful than any promotion, any headline, or any title someone else tries to take from you. By the end of the week, StratagemCore had lost its 3 biggest international clients. I watched it unfold like a silent storm rolling over their pristine headquarters. First, it was Daniel's company in São Paulo. Their legal team sent a termination notice that morning, citing strategic misalignment with StratagemCore's direction. Then came Lucia's firm in Madrid. They declined to renew, noting leadership inconsistency and ongoing delays. Hours later, Noah's Singapore-based group pulled out. 3 statements, 3 signatures, no drama, no public announcement, but inside StratagemCore, the alarms were blaring. They tried to recover. I heard through the grapevine that Julian personally called 2 of the CEOs, offered huge discounts, waived penalties. He even suggested flying out to smooth things over in person. I knew the moves. I had made those calls for him more times than I could count. But it was too late. The trust was gone. Those clients had not just walked away from StratagemCore, they had walked toward something better. They walked toward me, toward Solvanta. We signed the contracts within 72 hours of their exits, 3 exclusive deals, all long-term. Each had unique deliverables, staggered rollouts, and locked-in advisory rights for Solvanta's team. Combined value, $1.7 billion over 8 years. It was the same number StratagemCore had once celebrated as my final deal before they cut me loose. But now, that figure belonged to us, to the team they overlooked, to the company they thought could never exist without their name attached to it. And these were not just any contracts. These were my contracts. The ones I had built piece by piece, relationship by relationship. I remembered the late nights on flights, the jet lag in hotel lobbies, the hundreds of video calls at strange hours in different time zones. I remembered translating dense compliance briefs into simple terms, redesigning rollout frameworks so every office could follow the same rhythm. I had poured years into those relationships, not to be thanked, but to make them work. StratagemCore tried to erase me from those deals, but clients remember who shows up, and they remembered me. At Solvanta, we did not make a big announcement. We just started doing the work. The first call was with Daniel's logistics team. We walked through the updated performance metrics and proposed a new tracking dashboard, something StratagemCore had always promised but never delivered. They loved it. Lucia's firm brought us into their AI supply model overhaul. We built a prototype in 2 weeks, customized to their language, their region, and their team's workflows. Noah's group rolled out our data ops framework across 6 countries in under 3 months. While StratagemCore scrambled, we moved forward. Quiet, fast, effective. We did not have layers of management or bloated meetings or endless approval loops. We had trust, we had clarity, and we had momentum. I heard that StratagemCore held an emergency town hall to address recent changes in the market. Julian blamed the losses on a shifting global landscape. He never once mentioned my name. I was not surprised. He still thought this was about business. He never understood it was about people. Tessa, from what I heard, was overwhelmed. Her team kept missing follow-up deadlines. She was unfamiliar with the project pipelines I had built, and none of the middle managers could explain them. Some of them had left already, quietly. Others were looking. A few had reached out to me on LinkedIn, not asking for jobs, just saying, "I see what you are building. It is impressive." That was enough. I did not need praise. I just needed them to see what was real. StratagemCore had always acted like clients were numbers. But to me, they had names, stories, real problems, and real expectations. And when the time came, those people did not hesitate. They knew who had helped them grow, who had answered their calls, who had stayed up past midnight troubleshooting with their teams. So when I said, "Let's build from here," they listened, because they knew I meant it. The irony was poetic. The same deals they once used to justify pushing me out were the very deals that helped launch Solvanta. They tried to erase me, but instead, they erased themselves. And I did not have to sabotage anything. I did not need revenge schemes or backroom tactics. All I had to do was keep my word, do the work, and wait. Because when you build something solid, it speaks for itself. And in the silence that followed their collapse, the sound of Solvanta rising was unmistakable. Solvanta launched with a quiet press release. No champagne photos, no lofty promises. Just a simple statement. Solvanta Group is open for business. That was it. No drama, no fanfare. But people noticed. Within hours, former colleagues, old clients, and a few curious reporters started connecting the dots. 3 major clients had walked from StratagemCore and signed with a brand new firm founded by someone they barely acknowledged during her exit. In an industry that thrives on whispers and reputation, that spoke louder than any billboard ever could. By the end of the second week, we had 27 employees across 5 time zones. A handful were people I had worked with before, quiet pros who did not chase attention, only results. The rest were sharp, driven, and tired of being overlooked at places like StratagemCore. We had 6 partners in place, each with equity and decision-making authority. We made it clear from day one, Solvanta would not be run like the dinosaurs. No endless meetings, no fragile egos. Just work, clarity, and shared success. People got it, fast. We did not have to pitch loudly because our results spoke first. Clients started referring other clients. Our name started showing up in internal briefings from competitors. The same people who used to glance past me in boardrooms now watch my LinkedIn updates like weather reports. Industry forums started calling us the disruptor no one saw coming. But I had seen it. I had planned it. Every piece of this had been mapped out quietly in that dusty Chicago co-working space, while StratagemCore was busy rewarding mediocrity with promotions. Then came the feature in Forbes Women in Business. It was not something I chased. A reporter reached out after hearing how we flipped a multi-million-dollar logistics platform in Brazil in under a quarter of the expected time. She asked if I would go on record about the journey. I said yes, but only if she focused on the team, the mission, and the work. The article ran under the headline, "The Strategist Who Rebuilt Everything." And just like that, my name, Evelyn Sloan, stood alone. No footnotes, no reporting to, no shared credit with men who had once told me I was too commanding to lead. It felt surreal, but not in the way people think. It was not glittery or emotional. It felt quiet, clear, like I had been standing in a fog for years, and someone finally opened a window. I did not want revenge headlines. I wanted recognition on my own terms. And that was exactly what I got. No more being someone else's fixer. No more writing speeches for Julian while he forgot to mention me on stage. No more cleaning up Tessa's mistakes while pretending they were wins. This was mine now, all of it. I became what they feared. Not because I tried to destroy them, but because I no longer needed them. They built a culture that thrived on control and exclusion. And then they handed power, by mistake, to someone who had been paying attention all along. I was not loud. I was not flashy. I just kept the receipts. Every time they overlooked me, every time they took credit for work they did not do, every time they confused being quiet with being weak, I remembered it all, and I built something from it. I started getting speaking invites, private investor inquiries, even job offers from the same firms that had once declined my resume a decade ago. I declined them all. I was not building Solvanta to climb back into someone else's structure. I was building something I had never seen before. A place where sharp women did not have to ask twice, where no one had to smile politely while watching someone less qualified take their spot. A place that felt, for once, like it belonged to all of us who had been passed over and underestimated. And the best part? We were just getting started. I had not given a single interview about StratagemCore. I had not mentioned Julian Cormack or Tessa or the day they fired me. I did not need to. Every headline they lost was already telling the story. Every client they failed to keep was writing the next chapter. And every morning I walked into Solvanta's office, or logged in from wherever I was in the world. I knew the truth. They had feared I might outgrow them one day. What they never expected was that I would rebuild the entire game. Julian Cormack was removed from StratagemCore's board within a month. The news was not blasted in the press, but it did not need to be. Those of us who had lived inside that world knew exactly what it meant. His power had always been performative, rooted in title, not substance. Without the contracts, without the illusion of control, he was just another suit with a bloated resume and no pipeline. The board called it a leadership restructuring. But let us be honest, it was a clean break, and everyone understood why. Tessa quietly resigned a week later. No goodbye post, no corporate press release. She simply disappeared from the company's internal system and deleted every post she had ever written about leading global strategy. That phrase used to make me grit my teeth. Now, it just made me tired. She had never led strategy. She had stumbled into a role built by other people's work and protected by fragile egos. When that protection vanished, so did she. No one really reached out. Even her inner circle, the ones who used to swarm her with praise, stayed silent. StratagemCore never recovered. They tried. God, they tried. They brought in outside consultants, they slashed prices and launched rushed campaigns. But the damage was done. Clients did not trust them. Their staff knew morale was hollow. The firm started bleeding talent, losing deals before they even pitched. And the irony? I did not lift a single finger to bring them down. I did not leak emails or drop anonymous tips. I simply told the truth out loud and walked away. The rest unfolded on its own, like a house built on sand finally giving in to gravity. People began to ask if this was revenge. I understood why. From the outside, it looked like the perfect payback. The woman they fired ended up building the firm that took their top clients and most valuable talent. The two people most responsible for pushing me out lost everything within weeks. If that is not revenge, what is? But I always answered the same way. No, this was not revenge. This was justice. Because revenge implies a personal vendetta, an emotional score. But this was about correction, about balance, about the truth finally catching up. I do not regret anything I built. I do not miss the version of myself that kept quiet to protect other people's reputations. That Evelyn no longer exists. She was replaced by someone who understands her value, speaks up without apology, and knows how to lead without permission. Solvanta was never about proving anyone wrong. It was about building something right. And once you have tasted that kind of clarity, you never go back to crumbs. You stop begging for a seat at the table. You start building your own. And here is the real lesson. If you ever find yourself betrayed like I was, overlooked, dismissed, or used, do not waste your time planning revenge. That kind of energy burns too fast and leaves you empty. Instead, invest that energy into truth. Build quietly. Prepare intentionally. Speak carefully. The world does not need more drama. It needs more clarity. You do not need revenge. You just need the truth to catch up. And believe me, it always does. Sometimes it arrives in whispers. Other times, it hits like thunder. For me, it came in an email from a junior consultant at StratagemCore. She wrote, "I just joined Solvanta. Thank you for showing us that there is another way." That was it. No vengeance, no bitterness, just restoration. The quiet power of showing up as yourself and refusing to be erased. That is the real win. And that is the story I will keep telling. Not the fall of StratagemCore, but the rise that came after. Not the people who tried to silence me, but the ones who said I'm in when it mattered. Because at the end of it all, it was never about them. It was about me and everyone like me, who has ever been told they are too much, too loud, too ambitious, too commanding. We are not. We were just in the wrong rooms. But now we are building new ones, bigger ones, smarter ones. And the people who once feared our voices, they are just learning what it feels like to be forgotten.